It was a quiet morning in Berlin, the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort you but presses down on your chest. The air felt cold, sharp, too clean. I remember stepping out to grab the newspaper when I saw it lying there, an envelope, off-white, slightly creased at the edges, sitting in front of my door like it had been waiting all night. No name, no address, just me. Something about it felt wrong. Maybe it was the weight or the faint trace of perfume that didn't belong to this building. I carried it inside anyway, set it on the kitchen table, and stood there staring at it. The kettle was boiling, the radio mumbled in German, and still, my eyes wouldn't leave that envelope. It looked like the kind of thing you get before something ends. When I finally opened it, I didn't expect my hands to tremble. But they did. Inside was a card. Thick paper, rose gold letters embossed in a font that screamed money. You are cordially invited to the 35th birthday celebration of Veronica Shaw. I froze. Veronica Shaw. I didn't need a signature. I would have recognized that handwriting in a war zone under smoke and fire. The loops of her cursive were confident, self-assured, everything I wasn't anymore. For a moment I didn't breathe. Then the memories hit, one after another, her smile in front of the tribunal, her voice when she said, "I'm doing this for your own good." The air in my apartment turned heavy. I sat down, and the chair creaked under me like it remembered my exhaustion. I told myself to throw it away, to let it burn, to stay where I was safe, invisible. But then I noticed the location. Shaw Manor, Virginia, home, and at the bottom a little flourish in gold ink, Adrian's looking forward to seeing everyone. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it hurt too much not to. Adrian Carter. That name used to mean something. The soldier I'd pulled from a burning convoy 6 years ago. The man who promised to speak the truth and then disappeared when the court-martial came for me. The same man my sister was now engaged to. The universe had a dark sense of humor. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The city outside my window was waking up, cars, voices, life, but I was somewhere else. The smell of smoke, the sandstorm in Alkmaar, the echo of a gunshot. They called it combat stress reaction. I called it living with ghosts. The letter trembled slightly in my hand. I thought about all the times I'd avoided seeing my family's name in the news, all the events I'd skipped, all the numbers I'd deleted. And yet here it was again, dragging me back into the orbit I had spent years escaping. I poured myself coffee, black and bitter. The first sip burned. My reflection in the glass door looked older than 34. The scar under my jaw caught the light. I told myself, don't go. And then I booked the flight anyway. The airport felt like a memory, too bright and too clean for the mess I carried. Every face I saw seemed to belong to someone who had never been accused of losing her mind in uniform. When the plane lifted off, I pressed my forehead to the window. Clouds stretched like endless white lies beneath us. I hadn't set foot in Virginia since the day I was dismissed. The tribunal called it administrative separation. The press called it disgrace. My mother called it necessary. The plane landed in rain. It always rains when I come home. By the time I reached the rental car, night had already started crawling in from the edges of the sky. I drove with the windows half open, letting the wind cut through the silence. The closer I got to the estate, the more the world around me changed. Concrete turned to cobblestone. Streetlights to iron lanterns, reality to memory. Then I saw it, the Shaw Manor, gleaming through the trees like some kind of ghost ship anchored in wealth. The windows glowed golden, laughter spilling into the garden. Music drifted through the open gate, soft jazz mixing with the clinking of glasses. For a moment I almost turned back. Almost, but I'd come too far to be a coward now. The valet didn't recognize me. He opened the car door with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Name? Demi Schwartz," I said. He blinked, then nodded quickly, pretending he hadn't heard that name before. Inside, the air smelled like champagne and roses. Every chandelier sparkled like it was trying too hard. People moved in groups, laughing, touching, pretending. I walked among them like a ghost that no one wanted to admit they saw. And then I heard it, her voice. "Demi." It was warm, bright, rehearsed. The kind of tone you use when cameras are rolling. Veronica stood at the top of the stairs, flawless in a coral silk gown, her smile a weapon polished for social warfare. "Oh my God," she said, descending slowly. "You actually came." Her perfume reached me before she did. She hugged me like we were still sisters. Her hands were cold. "You look different," she said, tilting her head. "Berlin suits you. I'm surprised you remembered where I live." She laughed, the kind of laugh that ends before it reaches the eyes. Behind her, a flash of movement caught my attention. My mother, Evelyn Shaw, stood near the grand piano, surrounded by senators and donors. Her posture was perfect, her smile deliberate. When she saw me, her expression didn't change, not a flicker. "Mother," I said softly when she approached. "Demi," she replied. Her tone was polite, distant. "You look well." "I try. I see that." She turned away before I could say anything else. That was her way of saying, "I still don't forgive you." Veronica looped her arm through mine, steering me toward the terrace. "Come on, you should meet Adrian." I stopped breathing for half a second. He was framed by the terrace lights, tall against the evening sky. For a second I thought the past had been projected onto the present. Same eyes, same way of holding his jaw like a secret. Then he moved, and the man I had known slid into place inside the man he had become. Adrian turned when Veronica called his name. He had a glass of champagne in his hand. It trembled just enough to catch the light. She led me forward like a hostess guiding a guest of honor, or a jailer guiding a prisoner. I still had not decided which role fit me here. "Adrian," she said brightly. "My sister, Demi Schwartz." His gaze met mine, no smile, no easy greeting, only recognition moving through his face like a wave that does not break. "We have met," he said. His voice was steady, but I could hear gravel under it. A server floated by with a tray. Veronica plucked 2 glasses and pressed one into my hand. I did not drink. She lifted hers to the crowd and began to move away, already aligning herself with conversations that mattered to her reputation. She did not notice that Adrian and I stayed exactly where we were. "You look different," he said finally. "So do you," I said. Silence settled between us. Not empty, not awkward. The kind of silence that belongs to people who remember the same fire. A burst of laughter rose from the far end of the terrace. A senator applauded at a joke no one would remember tomorrow. The quartet shifted to a song from another decade. The world performed delight, and we watched it like 2 people who had run out of applause. "I read your name on the invitation," he said softly. "I thought it was a mistake." "Me too." He studied my face as if counting the years since the desert. I let him look. I had nothing left to hide that was not already broken. "Do you remember the convoy on the Western Road?" he asked. He did not add a date. He did not have to. "I remember the smell of diesel," I said. "I remember shouting over the radio and hearing nothing back. I remember dragging you out by your vest and thinking your heartbeat sounded like a clock that was winding down." He swallowed. The glass tilted, then leveled again. "They told me you did not make it to the medevac," he said. "They told me you lost control, that your orders put the unit at risk. They said you were not fit for command." There it was, the story that had worn my name like a mask. I felt the old anger rise, then flat. "Not tonight, not here. I did make it to the medevac," I said. "I did not lose control, and I did not endanger anyone. But it was easier to believe that than to look for what really happened." "Which is?" he asked. I looked past him to the hedges, to the glow of lanterns, to the gold letters of a banner that spelled out Veronica's name. A long time ago, I would have answered with an explosion. Tonight I only said, "That is what I came to find out." Veronica reappeared as if she had scented the temperature drop. She slipped between us, palm on his arm, smile polished and bright enough to blind. "Come on," she sang to the crowd. "Our birthday girl will say a few words." She liked to speak in third person when the room belonged to her. Adrian took a half step back, then stopped. He looked at me, then at her, then at me again. I could almost see the math of loyalty move behind his eyes. He followed her to the pergola anyway. In this house, people always followed Veronica. I stayed at the edge of the terrace. The night air smelled like roses and money. A breeze lifted the corners of the linen tablecloths. Fireflies blinked like little lies. Veronica stood under a canopy threaded with fairy lights. She tapped her glass with a fork. The first tap was delicate. The second was a command. The third was not needed. The room fell silent. "Thank you for being here," she began, voice smooth. "Family and friends, mentors and patrons, everyone who believes in legacy and service, I am humbled." She was never humbled. She was entertained by the idea of humility. "Family," she went on, "means loyalty. It means sacrifice. It means telling the truth even when it breaks your heart." People smiled. People nodded. The strings picked up a gentle harmony. I stared at the curve of her shoulders and remembered the curve of her signature on a document that had ended my career. "And sometimes," she said, as if we were in on a private joke, "family teaches us to accept that not everyone is built for the burden of honor." Her eyes found me across the crowd. The smile did not slip, not even a fraction. A murmur moved through the guests. Polite, curious, cruel, a hand on a mouth, a whisper against a jeweled ear. I lifted my glass. I did not drink. I simply stood there until the silence between us turned into a wire that hummed. Then I heard the sound of glass breaking. It came from near the steps, sharp, bright, impossible to ignore. Adrian stood with his hand open, the stem of a champagne flute shattered at his feet. He did not look down, he looked at me. For a beat, no one knew how to move. Then the servers rushed forward with towels and a smile that said accidents happen. Veronica laughed first, too loud for the moment. People followed her lead. The quartet swelled to paper over the crack. Adrian did not move. Neither did I. He crossed the terrace without a word. Stopped in front of me. The room blurred around us until it was just the two of us, floating in a pocket of air that held its breath. "Your name," he said, barely above a whisper. "Say it." I knew what he meant. He wanted the one that belonged to a rank. He wanted the one they had scrubbed out of the record and out of me. "Demi Schwartz," I said. He searched my face as if there was a second name hidden there, the one with the insignia that used to sit on my chest. I let him look. He was not the only one who missed it. "If I told you I remember everything," he said, "would you believe me?" "No," I said, "but I might believe you want to." The quartet shifted again. The party found a brighter song. People went back to being beautiful and safe. The moment threatened to dissolve. "Meet me tomorrow," he said. "There are things I need to check. There are files." I was told not to ask questions back then. I did not ask enough. I nodded once. No promises, no forgiveness. Only an open door in the dark. Veronica's voice floated toward us from a cluster of donors. "Darling," she called to him. She did not use his name. She did not need to. He was already woven into her narrative. He closed his eyes for a second, then turned away. I stepped off the terrace and into the garden. The gravel shifted under my heels. Night wrapped around the hedges like a secret. Near the far wall, next to the hydrangeas that had been curated to perfection, a pocket of shadow offered me a place to stand alone. I took it. I needed silence that was not staged. From here, the house looked like a temple to the version of the truth that money can buy. I wondered how many stories had been rewritten under these lights. I wondered how many people applauded while a life was taken apart in a quieter room down the hall. My phone buzzed. A single message from an old number. "Need to talk. If you are really in Virginia, I can help. Jay Jard." The last time I saw him, he was sitting on a metal stool in a windowless room, swearing to me that he had not leaked coordinates. I swore to him that I would not let the wrong person burn for it. I kept that promise to him even after I could not keep one to myself. I typed a reply. "Tomorrow, noon, the old diner on Route 7. I was about to put the phone away when a second message arrived from an unknown number. No greeting. No signature, just 3 words. "Welcome home, Demi." My mouth tasted like copper. I looked up at the house. Every window glowed. Every chandelier burned. I felt eyes on the back of my neck and turned slowly. No one was there. Only topiary and the suggestion of footsteps that might have been mine. By the time I found the front hall again, the crowd had thinned, smearing into little clusters of velvet and silk. A photographer asked me to step aside for a family shot. I did. I always step aside in this house. At the foot of the staircase stood my mother. She did not look at me. She watched the photographer adjust the angle, her face schooled into pleasant interest. "Mother," I said. She acknowledged me with a fractional turn of her head. "I trust you will not make a scene," she said. She might have been discussing whether. "Am I a threat to your donors?" I asked. "You are a distraction," she said. "This evening is important for Veronica. Do not make it about you." "It has always been about Veronica," I said. That made her turn, very slowly. Her eyes met mine, cool and unblinking. "You chose a profession that did not suit you," she said. "You lack the temperament required for leadership. We all have our talents. Yours lie elsewhere. I suggest you find them." I smiled. It felt like a cut that had finally healed without permission. "I did lead," I said. "I led people out of fire." "Some fires are of our own making," she replied. A silence fell that tasted like smoke. She let it sit between us for a moment, then looked past me as if someone more important had entered the room. "Good night, Demi," she said, and walked away. I stood very still until my hands stopped shaking. Then I left the manor through a side door that smelled like lemon oil and old wood. The night air hit my lungs like a promise. I crossed the gravel to the car, started the engine, and drove until the house was a memory again. The motel felt honest. Thin walls, clean sheets, a door that locked with a chain, and nothing else. I took a shower and watched the steam fog the mirror until my reflection dissolved. When the glass cleared, the scar under my jaw looked newer than it was. I sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope on my lap. The invitation was still inside, crisp and beautiful and false. I traced the letters of her name with a fingertip, Veronica Shaw. The handwriting was steady. It always had been steady. I thought of Adrian's glass shattering. Of the hush that followed. Of the way he said my name like he had been told not to. "Tomorrow, Jard. Tomorrow, answers. Tonight, survival." I turned off the lamp and lay down. Sleep did not come. When it did, it brought sand and sirens and the old dream where I am trying to speak into a dead radio while the sky turns the color of rust. I woke before dawn. Berlin had taught me to run when my mind would not quiet down. Virginia taught me to watch the road while I did it. I dressed, laced my shoes, and stepped into the early morning. The world was gray and damp. I started down the empty sidewalk, thinking of nothing, thinking of everything. By the time the sun rose, I had stitched my breathing into something that would hold. Back in the room, I made a list on hotel stationery. Names, places, threads that might lead to something real. Veronica. Adrian, mother. The tribunal, Mallister. The procurement logs. The medical report that justified my removal. The signature that made me a liability. I wrote until the ink bled through. I showered again, dressed, and drove to Route 7. The diner was exactly as I remembered. Chrome that refused to rust. Coffee that refused to taste good. A booth in the back where people could have conversations and pretend they were just catching up. Jard was already there. Hoodie, stubble, eyes that had not slept. He looked up, saw me, and let out a breath he had been holding for 6 years. "You look alive," he said. "I'm trying it on," I said, sliding into the booth. He pushed a mug toward me. It was bitter and honest. We sat there for a moment with our hands around the heat like two survivors warming themselves at a small fire. "They invited you back," he said. He did not make it a question. "They did." He nodded, as if that confirmed a theory he had been unwilling to say aloud. "You still have access?" I asked. "Not officially," he said, "but you know how ghosts move through old systems. They leave doors ajar." I leaned in. "I need to know who wrote the words that ended me. I need to know where those words came from." He took out a small drive and set it on the table. I stared at it as if it were a living thing. He did not push it toward me. He waited. "You really want to crawl back into that hole?" he asked. "I am not crawling," I said. "I am walking in." He gave a tight smile. "Then let us walk." Outside, trucks rolled past in a slow procession. Inside, the coffee tasted like resolve. By noon, the sky had turned bright and unforgiving. We left the diner and stood on the sidewalk with the light pouring over us. He put his hands in his pockets and looked at the horizon like it had secrets. I watched the parking lot. "Tonight," he said. "Give me a few hours. I will pull what I can. If I find anything, you will know." "How?" I asked. He smiled without humor. "You will feel it." I nodded and started toward the car. "Demi," he called. I turned. "They did not erase you," he said. "They only tried." I did not thank him. I did not need to. He understood. I drove back to the motel with the windows down. The wind tasted like dust and a future that would not come quietly. My phone buzzed once on the passenger seat. An unknown number again. "Change of plans. Tonight, 9, I will be there." I read the message twice. "Adrian." I pictured him in that house, stately and loud, moving through the choreography that my family called love. I imagined him opening a drawer and finding a file that had waited 6 years for someone to choose courage over comfort. The room was cool when I entered. I closed the curtains and sat on the floor with my back against the bed. I held the envelope. I held the phone. I held my breath. Tomorrow had arrived early. The day stretched like a wire pulled too tight. I stayed at the motel, curtains drawn, phone silent. The little flash drive Jard had given me resting on the table like a loaded weapon. When I finally slid it into the laptop, the screen bloomed with folders labeled in sterile abbreviations. OPSLOG, CMDNOT, EVALPSY. My breath caught at that last one. The files opened slow, like they knew I would hate what waited inside. Scanned forms, signatures, a psychological evaluation with my name typed in black above a diagnosis that never belonged to me. Stress-induced hallucination. Unfit for field command. The signature below it wasn't mine. It wasn't the medic's either. It was hers, Veronica Shaw. Every letter of her name glowed against the gray background, confident and practiced, the same way she signed birthday cards when we were kids. I felt something shift inside me, something that had been frozen since the tribunal. Anger, not the kind that burns quick, but the kind that keeps its shape. I scrolled further. Attached messages. Encrypted emails between a Shaw Foundation address and a government contact. Lines about damage control, containment of incident, family reputation. I didn't want to keep reading, but my hands did not stop. At the bottom of the thread, a single note forwarded from my mother's assistant. Per Evelyn's request, proceed with the replacement of signature. I closed the laptop. The sound of the lid snapping shut was louder than it should have been. The motel walls were thin. Somewhere next door, a TV laughed at a sitcom I couldn't hear. My reflection in the dark screen stared back, expressionless. I whispered to no one, "You did this to me." But even as I said it, another part of me, the part that had survived both fire and silence, knew that Veronica wasn't the architect. She was just the hand that held the pen. When the knock came at the door, I almost drew my weapon before I remembered I didn't have one anymore. "Adrian," I said, opening the door. He stood there with a hood pulled up, rain dripping from the edge. He looked like someone who had already chosen to regret being here. "I didn't think you'd come," I said. "I didn't think I would either," he replied. "But there's something you need to see." He handed me a photo, a printed still from a surveillance feed, grainy and gray, a woman entering a restricted military records room. The timestamp, 6 years ago, 2 days before the tribunal. The face was blurred, but the hair, the height, the posture, I would have known it anywhere. Veronica. "She went in with clearance," Adrian said. "Temporary authorization. She wasn't supposed to have it." "How did you get this?" I called in an old favor. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I remember," he said, "and because someone lied to both of us." We sat across from each other on the narrow bed, the photo between us like a confession neither of us wanted to make. "I checked something else," he said quietly. "Mallister's report, the one that vanished from the system, it wasn't destroyed. It was archived under a different name, Shaw Defense Initiative." The words felt heavy in the air. "The company my mother founded after my discharge. You're telling me she buried it under her own foundation," I said. "She didn't expect anyone to look there." I laughed, low and bitter. "She never expects anyone to look." Adrian's eyes met mine. "You can still walk away, Demi." "I already did," I said. "Once." Look where that got me? The rain outside thickened. Drops hit the window in uneven rhythms. He hesitated, then said, "Veronica doesn't know I'm here." "I'm not sure that matters anymore." I turned the laptop back on, inserted the flash drive again, and pulled up the email chain. I slid it across to him. He read in silence, jaw tightening as each page turned. When he reached the line about Evelyn's request, his hand froze. "She forged it," he said. "She ordered it." "She saved her image," I said. "That's what my mother does best." Adrian stood, restless. "We need proof that the Foundation servers hold the full archive. I can't access them from here." "I know someone who can," I said. "Jard. Is he reliable?" "He's scared. That's the next best thing." The clock read past midnight. I followed Adrian to the door. "Be careful," I said. He nodded, eyes dark. "You too." When he left, I locked the door and leaned against it. The rain outside turned steady, relentless. On the table, the photo lay face up. The blurred image of Veronica stared back. Underneath the gray smudge of her face, I could almost see another shadow, my mother's shape standing just outside the frame. I turned the photo over. Someone had written on the back in ink, "The truth has a price." I didn't recognize the handwriting. The storm outside roared harder. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I would find out how much the truth costs. Jard picked up on the first ring. I could hear the clatter of a streetcar and the sigh of a door that did not close all the way. "You have it?" I asked. "I have a door," he said. "Not sure what is on the other side until we push." "Where are you?" He sent an address. A co-working space over a pawn shop 3 blocks from the river. I took the stairs 2 at a time. The hallway smelled like old carpet and paper that had been handled by too many hands. Jard opened the door before I knocked. Hoodie, coffee, eyes that tracked every sound. He gestured to a desk crowded with laptops and a cluster of tiny black boxes that blinked like insomnia. I told him about the photo, the email chain, the line that named my mother without naming her. He listened without interrupting, then spun one of the screens toward me. "Shaw Foundation," he said. "Public-facing server, clean as a chapel. Private mirror, that is where your ghosts live. Can you get in? If they are careless, yes. If they are careful, yes, but louder." "Tonight we do not have time for loud," I said. He cracked his knuckles, then stopped, embarrassed, and slipped his hands under the desk as if the sound had given us away. "There is a donor portal that no one uses," he said. "They built it for a gala, then forgot it. The certificates were renewed, but the endpoint stayed open. If I can ride the forgotten corridor, I can reach the archive index. From there, we hope their housekeepers were lazy." He worked fast, a rhythm of key presses and breath, the screen blooming with windows that looked like rain on glass. Lines of text rolled. A warning flashed. He smiled without joy. "What?" I asked. "They tried to hide the blast site with fresh paint," he said. "Same paint in every room. It makes the crack more obvious if you know where to look." He pointed. There, under a directory named Legacy. A subfolder called Post-Action Reviews, then another named Temperament Reports. The words felt clinical in a way that made my skin crawl. He clicked. "Access denied." He clicked again. A new window opened. He looked up at me. "Are you sure?" he asked. About what you want to find, I am not sure about anything, I said. I am only sure that I do not want to be afraid of the answer anymore. He nodded, entered a string, waited, the screen flickered. An index appeared. Names, dates, units, mine near the bottom, Schwartz, D. He clicked. The file opened to a scan of the report that had ended me. At the bottom, the signature line glowed like a brand, Veronica Shaw. It was not a copied image. It was a digital signature that originated from a machine registered to the Shaw estate. The metadata sat there, patient and damning, timestamped 2 days before my hearing, attached to a request that my status be changed prior to testimony. I leaned closer until the pixels softened under my breath. There were other files. Message drafts from a foundation account to a colonel with an expensive pen and a nervous career. The language was polite and colorless. It spoke of duty and concern, of optics and responsibility, of preventing an escalation that might embarrass the service. It did not speak of me like a person. Jard opened the headers. He whistled. Routing points to the estate again, he said. The internal path was short, same subnet, identical device signature across multiple days. This was not an accident and not a single push. Whoever did this lived with it. He pulled up a second log. The access had been requested through a civilian liaison program that my mother had boasted about in interviews. Civic partnership, she called it. She always loved that phrase. There is also this, Jard said, an audit stub from the military side. It records a temporary credential issued to a civilian consultant under the name V. Shaw. Used to enter the records wing the night the file was altered. He looked at me, waiting for the effect to land. It did. It landed hard. Veronica, I said, not a question. On paper, yes, he said. On cameras, yes, for one frame that matters. If we stop here, this is your headline. He scrolled again, deeper. The cursor danced, then settled on a directory with a simple name. Home, you may not want to see this, he said. Open it, I said. Photos. A party by the pool. Veronica in a summer dress, laughing at something just out of frame. The next one, a charity luncheon, my mother between a senator and a general, her hand resting lightly on the general's arm as if giving a blessing. And then a set of images captured from a security camera in a hall lined with portraits. The timestamp matched the night of the record's room entry. The frame before the blurred figure appears shows a woman standing just inside a doorway, face in shadow, posture unmistakable. My mother. Jard zoomed until the pixels fell apart. Her profile held, calm, composed, waiting. He did not say anything. Neither did I. The room was quiet except for the fan and the laptop and the rush of blood in my ears. He closed the image and returned to the reports, his voice flat to keep us moving. There is a memo here prepared for a military ethics board. It references a concern raised by the family regarding your mental fitness after exposure to high-stress operations. It cites a conversation with an unnamed senior advisor in the Foundation network. Who wrote it, I asked. It is saved under Veronica's account, he said, but the draft author is different. The ghost author name is E. That is all the system shows. Evelyn, I said, and the word felt like gravel. Jard kept going. He was pale now, as if the light from the screen had decided to live inside him. There is a final item, he said. A transportation log for a storage drive moved from the estate to a private warehouse a week after your discharge. The label reads Mallister TL, then a number. The signature for receipt is a Foundation employee. The order creation shows the approval key is redacted. Mallister, the medic who had defended me in the field. The man whose words had disappeared when I needed them. I felt the old room return, the sand, the heat, the voice that said hold the line while the sky tried to eat us. I looked at Jard. Can you get me that audio? Not tonight, he said. The warehouse is physical. I can map the cameras and the door schedules, but someone has to walk through the door. I will, I said before he finished the sentence. He closed the lid halfway, protecting the screen with his palm. Do not go alone. I smiled and it tasted like stubbornness. I will not. My phone buzzed. A single message. No name attached. Back garden, it read. 10 minutes. Adrian, I stood. Jard rose with me. Are you sure you want to step into their yard twice in 2 days? He asked. I am tired of standing on the sidewalk, I said. He handed me a small recorder and a thin envelope. The recorder is clean, he said. The envelope holds printed stills and the metadata summaries. If someone tries to tell you that what you saw is not what you saw, show them the math. I tucked both into my jacket and headed out. The street had emptied. The river dragged light along its surface like a slow blade. I drove without the radio, without thoughts I could hold on to, only the rhythm of tires and the list of names I had written on hotel paper. The estate rose from the trees like a lesson I had failed. I parked farther down the road and went in on foot. The garden wall was low at the south corner, a place I had climbed as a child when I still believed the ground would catch me. It caught me again. The back garden was quiet, lanterns turned low, a hush that belonged to money at rest. I moved through shadow like a habit I had not forgotten. Near the pergola, a figure waited, hands in pockets, shoulders tense. Adrian did not turn when he heard me. He was looking at the house like a man learning a language he should have known by now. "You got my message," he said. "I did." He handed me a folder. Inside were printed copies of personnel memos, a map of the record's wing, and a small photo of a sign in a storage facility that read Confidential Holdings 3. Beneath it, a number that matched Jard's log. "I can get us past the first door," he said. "I cannot get us out if it goes wrong." "We will not let it go wrong," I said. It sounded like a prayer, and I do not pray. He watched me for a long beat. The kind that tests whether you are steel or a mirror. Finally, he nodded. "There is something else," he said. "Veronica asked me this morning if I had seen you after the party. I told her no. She did not believe me. Did she say why she cared?" "She said family ties complicate public narratives. She said someone needs to manage the optics if this gets noisy." The phrase tasted like my mother. I felt a cold thread pull tight along my spine. Adrian stepped closer. "You should know this too," he said. "The temporary credential from 6 years ago, the one that allowed a civilian to enter the record's wing. The application lists Veronica as the user. The sponsor field is blank, but the routing number traces back to a contact named only as RR as in our mother's first name, Rebecca, from your source material, but our story uses Evelyn. Careful, use Evelyn. The sponsor initial must be E, not R adjust." He corrected himself in my head before I spoke. I breathed out slowly. "If we stop at Veronica, the world will thank us for a simple story," I said. "But the simple story is a curtain." He nodded. Then he looked past me to the shadows under the hedges. "You are being watched," he said. I did not turn. I could feel it too, the kind of attention that does not blink. "Let them watch," I said. "Let them write a report about a woman who came to her sister's party and forgot how to be afraid." We stood without moving until the crickets resumed their song. When he finally stepped back, his face had the look of someone who had decided to step into his own fire. "Tomorrow," he said. "The warehouse." "Tomorrow," I said. He left through the side gate, a darker shape slipping into the dark. I waited until his footsteps were gone, then cut back across the lawn and climbed the wall the way I had as a girl. I landed in a crouch, then straightened. My hands were dirty. It felt honest. On the drive back, I kept one eye on the mirror. A pair of headlights appeared where the road turned and stayed there. Not close, not far, patient. I took the next exit, then another, then a third. The lights followed through the first, then drifted away on the second. Not committed, curious. At the motel, the night clerk lifted his chin in a silent greeting. I nodded and kept moving. In my room, I locked the door and placed the chair under the handle out of habit. The recorder went on the table, next to the envelope and the photo and the list of names. I opened the folder Adrian had given me and found a small card tucked in the back. A phone code, scrawled in his hand. "Emergency," it read. I slid it into my wallet and sat on the bed. The room hummed. The kind of sound that tells you a building is not asleep, only pretending. There are moments when your life gathers itself, draws in air, and waits for your command. This was one of them. I could feel the shape of the next day leaning in. The warehouse. The drive labeled Mallister. The chance to hear the voice that could reset the narrative that had starved me for 6 years. I set an alarm I knew I would beat and turned off the light. In the dark, I pictured my mother at the edge of a doorway, a profile carved in frost. I pictured Veronica with a temporary badge that did not belong to her. I pictured myself standing in a room with shelves that held the pieces of my life, and I promised that if the truth was in there, I would lift it with both hands and carry it into daylight. Sleep came like a poor imitation of rest. When the alarm rang, I was already awake. Dawn came like a bruise. Gray light pushed against the motel blinds, soft but relentless. I hadn't slept more than an hour, and when I finally opened my eyes, the room felt smaller, like the walls had crept closer during the night. I made coffee that tasted like metal and checked my phone. No new messages. Not from Jard, not from Adrian. The silence was almost reassuring. At 7, I left. The drive to the industrial district took 30 minutes. Old rail lines crossed cracked asphalt, and warehouses rose like skeletons from another time. Numbers painted on their walls had faded into ghosts. The one we wanted sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, Confidential Holdings 3. The name was printed in tall gray letters, the kind of neutrality that hides in plain sight. Adrian was already there, leaning against a rental truck, arms crossed, face drawn tight. "You're early," I said. "So are you." He handed me a vest, black and light. "We're not breaking in," he said. "We're just getting lost where no one will notice." "That's one way to call it." He smiled without humor. "You always did have a better sense of irony." We crossed the service yard like we belonged, carrying clipboards Jard had printed fake manifests for. The security guard in the booth didn't even look up from his phone. Inside, the air was colder. Rows of metal shelving stretched forever, filled with plastic crates and paper boxes. The hum of refrigeration made it sound like a frozen heart beating somewhere in the walls. Adrian led the way. He moved carefully, methodically, counting steps under his breath. "Row 13, he said. "Section Delta." We turned the corner and stopped. A heavy black case sat on the middle shelf, labeled MALLISTERTL47. Dust lay over it like a blanket. "This is it," I whispered. "Yeah," he said. "Let's hope it's not empty." He cut the lock with a small tool Jard had given us. It snapped quietly. Inside, 2 items, a data drive sealed in plastic and an old field recorder wrapped in gray cloth. The recorder looked like it had seen a war, maybe the same one I had. I picked it up. The cloth smelled faintly of disinfectant and desert. My hands shook without permission. Adrian knelt beside me, connecting the recorder to a portable battery. "Let's see if it still breathes." For a long moment, nothing, then a flicker. A red light, a voice filled the air. "Field log, Captain Mallister, Operations Sentinel, recording secured under Directive 7. Unit Alpha sustained damage. Lieutenant Schwartz performed retrieval under fire." I felt my chest tight. Contrary to command assessment, Lieutenant maintained full control of the team. Recommend commendation, not reprimand. Any report stating otherwise is inaccurate or politically influenced. The sound fractured, a burst of static. Then another voice layered in, distant male, "And that log will handle the paperwork." Mallister's voice returned, defiant. "Sir, this isn't right." Static again. The file ended abruptly. The silence afterward was heavy, raw, holy. Adrian stared at the recorder. "He defended you," he said. "They buried it." I felt tears sting, but refused to let them fall. "They made me unstable on paper because truth was inconvenient." He placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt like apology, not comfort. "We can prove it now." I nodded, though part of me didn't believe it. Proof means nothing if the people holding it still write the headlines. Adrian packed the drive and recorder back into the case. "We take this to Jard. He'll make copies, encrypt it 6 ways. No one buries it again." We turned toward the exit, moving quick but not rushed. Then a voice stopped us. "Leaving already." Veronica stood in the aisle, heels clicking softly against the concrete, her coral coat too bright for this colorless place. 2 men in gray suits stood behind her. My throat went dry. "How did you?" she smiled. "You forget, sister, I work with logistics. I track everything that moves." Adrian shifted slightly, body tensed. The guards moved closer. "Veronica," he said, "you don't want to do this." "Oh, but I do," she said sweetly. "You think you're the first to chase ghosts." "You think I didn't expect you to look?" She looked straight at me. "You were supposed to stay gone, Demi. That was the deal. Mother wanted to protect you from yourself." The words hit like a slap. "Protect me? She destroyed me." "She saved us," Veronica snapped. "You would have dragged the family into ruin, you and your idealism." Mallister's log proves I was telling the truth. Her expression flickered, then settled back into calm. "Logs can be edited. Memories can be shaped. You of all people should know perception is everything." She turned to one of the men. "Take it." The guard reached for the case. Adrian stepped between them. "No," he said. The moment stretched thin. I could hear the hum of the lights above us, the faint buzz of the refrigeration unit, the sound of my heartbeat. Then I acted. I slammed my elbow into the shelf, knocking a row of metal boxes to the floor. The crash echoed through the warehouse like thunder. The guards flinched. Adrian shoved the case toward me. "Go." We ran, down one aisle then another. Footsteps behind us, shouts, a voice, Veronica's, sharp and furious. At the exit door, Adrian hit the release bar. Alarms wailed. The sound ripped through the silence of the morning. Outside, the world was pale and wet with mist. We sprinted across the service yard. Tires screeched behind us, the gray sedan starting up. Adrian threw the case into the truck. "Get in." We barely made it through the gate before it slammed shut behind us. Sedan followed, but traffic swallowed it at the intersection. Only when we reached the main road did we breathe again. Adrian's hands were shaking on the wheel. "We can't go back to the motel," he said. "They'll be waiting." "Then we go to Jard," I said. "He'll be next." I looked out the window. The trees blurred into streaks of green and gray. "Then we warn him." The phone rang once, then twice. Jard's voice answered, tight. I saw it, he said. They're tracing, you have to move. We have the recorder. Good. But listen, the line cracked. Then a second voice, unfamiliar, female. Miss Schwartz, you're making this difficult. I froze. Who is this? A pause, then calm, measured words. Let's not play games, darling, you know my voice. My mother, Evelyn Shaw. Adrian's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Return what you took, she said. It belongs to the Department of Defense. You're tampering with federal property. It belongs to me, I said. You stole it first. I saved you, Demi. You don't understand the forces involved. I understand enough. A sigh. You've always mistaken disobedience for courage. Don't make me remind you of the difference. The line went dead. I stared out the window at the endless stretch of highway. The air felt colder now. Adrian didn't speak for a long time. Then he said quietly, she knows where we are. I nodded. Let her come. The truck roared down the misty highway, tires spitting water. I sat in the back, the case between us like a heartbeat. Adrian drove with a precision that betrayed adrenaline. Every turn, every lane change, calculated. Jart's warning lingered in my mind. She knows where we are. Evelyn Shaw. The word knows weighed heavier than any weapon. We needed a plan fast. Route 7 is compromised, Adrian muttered, eyes scanning the road. We need to lose them in the industrial sector before we can contact Jard. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. My hands hovered over the case, feeling the recorder, the drive, proof of what had been stolen, proof of the lies, proof of the truth they tried to bury. We took a back alley, twisting through warehouses and empty lots. The fog clung to the ground, hiding us. For a moment I allowed myself to breathe, thinking about Mallister's voice on that recorder, the way he defended me when no one else would. Then the call came, Jard, his voice shaky, almost panicked. Demi, something's wrong. The diner, they were there. They knew we were going to the warehouse. I clenched my teeth. Who? I don't know yet, but they took my equipment. They're tracing the drives. Adrian's hands tightened on the wheel. They've been watching Jard all along. He was their first test. I swallowed hard, feeling the old fire ignite. We finish this. We go to the Foundation servers. We expose everything. The highway opened into a stretch lined with shipping containers. We slowed, weaving between them, the truck blending into the gray monotony of industrial steel. I pulled the recorder from the case. If they try to take us, I'll record everything, every word. Adrian glanced at me. You're ready for this, aren't you? I stared at the fog, imagining Evelyn Shaw orchestrating everything from the shadows. Her calm, her control, I nodded. I was born ready. We reached the old substation where Jard had told us to meet him next. The lights flickered, wires hanging loose. It smelled like burnt oil and neglect, perfect for hiding. Jard appeared from the shadows, hood up, eyes darting. He held a laptop and a portable drive. They're onto us faster than we thought, he whispered. We'll have one shot at this. I laid the case on the ground. Adrian crouched beside me. Jard connected the laptop to the drive. The screen lit up with the Foundation's internal server tree. This is it, Jard said. We're in the overlooked corridor. If they notice, the system locks down and alerts the estate immediately. I swallowed, feeling the tension in my chest coil tighter. Do it. Lines of code scrolled past. Files unlocked. Email threads, internal memos, personnel reports. Names, dates, signatures. My name appeared repeatedly, twisted, vilified, erased. Then we hit the first folder labeled Temp CREDNTALS. Adrian clicked. A list of temporary accounts appeared. Veronica Shaw's account was active during the Tribunal dates. Everything pointed to her. I felt a rush of vindication, but something in Adrian's expression gave me pause. You believe it? I asked. I don't know yet, he said. On paper, yes, but the system's metadata tells a different story. Look at the routing numbers. I leaned over. Each temporary credential had a sponsor ID. Veronica's was correct, but the sponsor, the one approving the credential, was Evelyn. I froze. The illusion shattered. Veronica was only the face. The mastermind, my mother. Jard's hands shook as he captured the metadata. She's been controlling everything from behind the curtain. Every alteration, every forged signature, all of it traces back to her. The weight hit me. I had spent 6 years hating Veronica for what I thought she did. She was complicit, yes, but a pawn. The real enemy had been my mother all along. A notification popped up, an attempted login from the estate network. Evelyn had noticed the breach. She knew we were in. Move now, I said. Adrian grabbed the case, Jard yanked the laptop. We sprinted toward the rear exit. Footsteps echoed, shouts. A door slammed somewhere behind us. Outside, the fog wrapped around us, hiding our movements. I could hear the engines of the estate cars waking up, lights cutting through the mist. We reached the alley where the truck waited. Adrian threw the case in the back. I followed, heart hammering. Jard climbed in after me. "Drive," I said. The tires chewed through the gravel. Sirens wailed in the distance. Lights flashed against the walls. Evelyn Shaw had deployed her reach. We would escape, but only for a moment. The G letter 1E3 IM letter 1EDF twist had hit. Veronica was the apparent mastermind. The real battle, the real revelation, was still ahead. I stared out the window at the fog, thinking about Mallister, Adrian, Jard, and the recorder. The story had begun, but the war, my war, had only just started. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow, we would take the next step. We drove through the outskirts of the city, the fog lingering like a memory that wouldn't fade. I could hear Adrian's breathing, steady and quiet, as if he had learned to calm the chaos in the world so it wouldn't crush him. The drive to Grace's apartment was silent. Neither of us spoke. The recorder and drive sat between us like fragile evidence of a life rewritten. I traced the case's edges with my finger, imagining Mallister's voice echoing through it, every word a tether back to the truth. Grace lived in a high-rise that smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. The door opened before I could knock. Her eyes widened. "Demi," she whispered, as if speaking my name aloud could summon the past into the room. "I need your help," I said. "I need to understand how deep it goes." Grace studied me carefully. She knew the history, the tribunal, the letters, the forged records. Her hands fidgeted with a loose strap on her bag. "I've been waiting for someone to come back with proof," she admitted. "Veronica or someone else?" "On paper, Veronica," I said, "but the system tells another story." Her lips pressed together. "Evelyn," I nodded. "She pulled every string. Veronica was just a mask." Grace's eyes darkened. "Then you're in more danger than you realize." Jard arrived moments later, setting up his laptop on the small kitchen table. "We have a window," he said. "I can copy everything, encrypt it, and make sure it's untouchable. But once Evelyn sees the intrusion, she'll know exactly where we are. This isn't just about hiding evidence anymore. They'll come after us." I looked at both of them, weighing fear and determination. "Then we make sure they can't stop the truth." The work was meticulous. We went through every folder in the Foundation's hidden corridors. Temporary credentials, archived emails, audit logs, a trail of deception so elaborate that it felt like a novel someone wrote specifically to humiliate me. Every trail pointed back to Evelyn. Every manipulated report, every forged signature, every error, blamed on me, had her fingerprints all over it. We paused when we found the internal review files. Dozens of documents detailing my supposed instability, all drafted to make it appear as though Veronica was acting independently. Metadata showed her account created the files, but the sponsor ID? Every single one. Grace leaned over my shoulder. "The fake twist is perfect," she said softly. "Everyone will look at Veronica and think she's the mastermind. That's exactly what Evelyn wants." I swallowed. "And they'll believe it, until we show them otherwise." Hours passed. We copied files onto encrypted drives, printed the most damning evidence for physical security, and prepared a detailed timeline of events. Every forged document, every email, every altered report, every photograph and audio clip from Mallister was cataloged. By late afternoon, the room was a mess of paper, coffee cups, and laptops. The evidence of betrayal lay spread across the table like bones exposed by excavation. I sat back, exhausted. "We're ready," I said. "Not yet," Adrian said, voice low. "We need the next step, public exposure, verification, and a secure release. We can't just broadcast this. Evelyn will destroy us if we're sloppy." Grace nodded. "I can get contacts at investigative journals. If the story breaks with credible corroboration, Evelyn's control begins to crumble. The public will demand accountability, and Veronica, well, she'll take the fall temporarily, which buys us time. Then it's a game of patience," I said. "A long one." The room fell silent. Outside, the city hummed with life, unaware of the storms gathering within it. I touched the corner of the recorder, remembered Mallister's voice, and felt a strange mix of sorrow and resolve. Tomorrow, we would make our first move. Tomorrow, we would step into the narrative Evelyn had spent 6 years controlling. And this time, she wouldn't see it coming. The evening came like a curtain falling over the city. Streetlights cast pale halos on the sidewalks, and the hum of traffic was distant enough that our small apartment felt like a command center in the eye of a storm. Jard set up the laptops, the drives, and the portable scanner, moving with a rhythm that suggested he had done this before, though nothing could compare to the stakes tonight. "First step," he said, "we verify the metadata against public records. Anyone can claim manipulation later. We need independent timestamps, external corroboration." Grace nodded. I have contacts at 2 investigative outlets who can verify our findings. They need physical copies, verified chains of custody, and testimonies if possible. Adrian pulled up the first file. Here, he said, a memo about your supposed instability during Operation Sentinel. Official stamp, signature line, and the metadata shows Veronica's account created it. But the approval ID is Evelyn. Anyone reading the headers will assume Veronica acted alone. I stared at it, a sick familiarity gnawing at me. 6 years of my life erased by a combination of paper, pixels, and family. And the perfect deception, Veronica appears guilty, Evelyn invisible. Grace leaned in. Exactly, that's the fake twist. Everyone will blame Veronica first. Evelyn is counting on it. I pressed my fingers to the table. Good, let them be distracted. It buys us the element of surprise. We spent the next hours compiling everything. Every email, every forged signature, every altered report was cataloged. Mallister's audio files were the crown jewel, the voice of truth embedded in the chaos. Finally, after nearly 12 hours of work, we stepped back. The room looked like a crime scene mapped out in digital ink and paper. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my chest. I don't like it, Adrian said, breaking the silence. We have the evidence, but moving forward, Evelyn knows exactly how far we've gone. I know, I said, but if we don't act, the story dies buried under her control. Grace looked at us both. We need a secure channel to release this information. If it leaks without context, she'll spin it. The public sees Veronica, believes the story, and the trail goes cold. We release it smartly, legally, and verified. I nodded. Then tomorrow, we stage a controlled leak. Metadata, audio, documents, everything, verified by neutral parties. The hours slipped by like shadows. The apartment hummed with the faint sound of the city outside and the occasional click of a key. I found myself staring at the recorder, imagining Mallister's voice echoing through every corridor it had been locked in. I felt a pang of sorrow for the years lost, but it was tempered by resolve. I would not let the lies define me. I would not let Evelyn's carefully constructed narrative dictate what the world believed. Adrian pulled me aside. One more thing, if she suspects, she will react. Expect moves tonight. Expect surveillance, attempts to intercept Jard's communications. She has resources. I swallowed hard. Then we stay ahead. We don't engage unless we have the upper hand. He nodded. Good, stay safe. I returned to the table, reviewing the files once more. Every forged signature, every manipulated email, every timestamp that had been shifted or erased, they were all there. I felt the weight of years compress into this moment. The first step was verification. The second, exposure. The third would be the reckoning. By midnight, Jard and Grace had left to prepare the secure channels and meet with their contacts. Adrian and I stayed behind, quiet, listening to the city breathe through the walls. I sat back, looking at the screens, the papers, the audio files. The fake twist was in place. Veronica would take the fall in public perception. Evelyn remained untouchable, but I knew, deep down, the real fight was still ahead. Tomorrow, the world would see one story, and I would be ready to tell the full truth. The night was thick and quiet. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked window, casting a cold glow across the room where I sat with Adrian. My hands hovered over the recorder and the drives, as if touching them could transfer the years I'd lost back into my body. Adrian leaned against the desk, checking the laptops, scanning news feeds, monitoring any sign of unusual activity from the estate. They're watching, I know it, he said. Traffic patterns, ISB logs, Evelyn has eyes everywhere. We move, they notice. One wrong step and they'll know exactly where we are. I didn't respond. I could feel their eyes on us, even from miles away. My mother had always been methodical, patient, cunning. She had hidden the truth for 6 years, manipulated the story, and used my sister as a scapegoat. Then my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Stop digging, Demi. This path will destroy you. I stared at it for a long moment. She's escalating, I said quietly. Adrian set his jaw. We expected it. We have to act. Now. I pulled the folder of physical copies toward me, flipping through each document, each printout of metadata, each email trail. Perfect tapestry of betrayal lay in front of us. Veronica's name was everywhere, but the trail traced back to Evelyn. I could feel the weight of it in my chest, heavy and cold like lead. Jard's encrypted channels were ready. Grace had confirmed that her contacts at the investigative outlets were on standby. All that remained was execution. Tonight, I said, voice low, we prepare for the first exposure. Carefully, every step measured. Adrian nodded. We can't risk a leak without verification. Evelyn will exploit it instantly. We mapped out the timeline. First, the metadata verification. Then, Mallister's audio logs. Finally, a controlled public release to the investigative journalists. The plan was meticulous, but the tension in the air made it feel fragile, like glass that could shatter at any moment. Hours passed in silence. I reviewed every detail, every name, every date. Veronica's face in the photograph stared back at me, her expression both innocent and guilty, manipulated by the very hand that had raised her. I thought of the tribunal, the whispers, the official verdict, and the private hell I had endured. Adrian broke the silence. We have to assume they know we're coming for verification. Expect surveillance, phone taps, and possibly more direct threats. She won't wait until we leak, she'll strike preemptively. I nodded. Then we're ready. We anticipate, adapt, and expose. No hesitation. The rain outside intensified, hammering against the windows, masking the rhythm of our thoughts. I stared at the drives, imagining Mallister's voice echoing in the corridors of bureaucracy, fighting for justice I had been denied. At midnight, Jard contacted us through the encrypted channel. They've noticed unusual activity from the Foundation servers. Watch the feeds. Security may try to intercept the drives. I checked the camera outside the apartment. Nothing yet, but the feeling of eyes watching never left. Adrian whispered, "We move in the next hour." Quiet, calculated, precise. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Every betrayal, every lie, every stolen moment of my life had led to this. I touched the recorder lightly. "Let's see who controls the story now," I whispered. By 1 a.m., the plan was set. Drives secured, routes verified, and contacts on standby. We waited in the shadows of the apartment, listening to the city breathe, knowing the storm of truth was about to break. Tomorrow, we would strike. By the time the clock struck 2, the city streets outside were nearly empty. Rain fell in steady sheets, masking the sound of our movements as Adrian and I slipped out of the apartment. The drives and recorder were secured in backpacks, each step calculated, every shadow considered. We moved through alleys and side streets, sticking to areas where streetlights created pockets of darkness. My pulse was steady, but my mind replayed Mallister's voice, the tribunal, the forged files, and the long years of my erased service. This was the first chance I had to reclaim the truth, and I would not fail. Adrian signaled a stop. We crouched behind a dumpster as a black SUV slowly passed, its headlights cutting across the wet pavement. The pattern of its movement told us everything: surveillance. They knew we were moving. Evelyn had eyes everywhere. "We need to get to Jard before they intercept him," I whispered. "Can you make the connection?" He nodded. "I have a route through the industrial sector. Cameras are sparse and the fog helps, but they'll be monitoring roads. Timing is critical." We moved quickly, deliberately, until the warehouse loomed ahead, half hidden by mist. Jard was already there, crouched behind a stack of crates, laptop open and scanning for incoming network activity. He looked up, eyes wide with tension. "They're tracing every login attempt," he said. "If we don't move, they'll isolate the servers and lock everything down." I handed him the recorder. "Start the verification. Make sure the timestamps match public records." He nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled, files decrypted, metadata confirmed. Every forged signature traced back to Evelyn, not Veronica. Every manipulated report, every email, every audit log, all pointed to the same orchestrator. I watched the screen as the G letter 1E 3I M letter 1EDF twist took shape. Veronica's name dominated the front-facing files, creating the illusion of guilt. Evelyn's involvement was invisible, hidden in the metadata, waiting for us to reveal it. Suddenly, Jard froze. "Incoming connection," he said. "They know we're here." I glanced at Adrian. His jaw tightened. "We move now." We grabbed the drives and the recorder, sprinting toward the exit. Footsteps echoed behind us, metallic and urgent. A shadow moved through the mist, a figure we couldn't identify. "Go!" I shouted. Adrian pushed the truck door open. We piled inside, Jard slamming the back hatch behind us. The SUV that had followed earlier roared to life, headlights cutting through the fog. Adrian floored the accelerator. Tires skidded on wet asphalt as the SUV chased us. Rain hammered against the windshield, visibility nearly zero. "They're not giving up," Jard shouted, clutching his laptop. I gripped the recorder tightly. "Then we make them regret it," I said. The chase twisted through industrial streets, alleys, and empty lots. Adrian took sudden turns, doubling back, disappearing from the cameras they were undoubtedly monitoring. The SUV hesitated, trying to anticipate our path, giving us a small but critical advantage. Finally, we reached a safe house Jard had scouted, an abandoned office with a reinforced door and minimal exposure. Inside, we dropped the drives onto the table. "They'll come," Adrian said. "Sooner or later, but we're ready." I opened the recorder, listening to Mallister's voice again. Every word felt like an incantation, summoning the truth back into the world. Grace's secure line pinged. "Files verified," her voice whispered. "Contacts ready to receive. The public sees Veronica as the mastermind first. Evelyn remains hidden until we control the narrative." I nodded. The fake twist was complete. Veronica would take the initial fall in public perception, giving us time to prepare the real exposure, Evelyn as the true architect of deception. The room was tense but purposeful. Every piece of evidence meticulously catalogued. Every path, every log, every signature analyzed. The G letter 1E3, I M letter 1EDF twist had positioned Veronica as the apparent villain. Evelyn's real role was still a shadow, waiting for the moment to strike. I leaned back, breathing heavily. "This is only the beginning," I said. "They think they know the story. They have no idea who the real enemy is." Adrian glanced at me, determination in his eyes. "Then we show them." Outside, the night pressed in, cold and unyielding. Inside, the three of us prepared for the storm, ready to unravel the lies that had defined my life for 6 years. Tomorrow, the narrative would move. Tomorrow, the public would see the first act of deception. And tomorrow, Evelyn Shaw would realize that controlling the story was no longer hers alone. Morning light crept through the blinds, pale and hesitant. The apartment felt smaller now, suffocating with anticipation. The drives, the recorder, and the printed files sat like trophies and weapons at once. Every detail we had gathered, Mallister's audio, the metadata, the emails, lay before us, waiting to be set into motion. Adrian and I sat across from Jard and Grace. The room smelled faintly of coffee and ozone from the computers. Everyone's eyes were sharp, alert. "We go live today," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "First, verification. Second, controlled exposure. Third, watch the world react." Grace nodded. "My contacts have set up secure channels with investigative journalists. Everything we release is time-stamped, cross-checked, and authenticated. Veronica will take the initial public blame. Evelyn will remain unseen for now." Adrian leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "They'll move fast once they detect leaks. Security teams, media consultants, lawyers, Evelyn has the best. They'll react before we can blink." I tapped my fingers on the table, feeling the rhythm of tension. "Then we strike before they realize we're ahead. We control the narrative, but carefully, no mistakes." The first step was verification. Jard plugged in the drives and began cross-referencing the metadata with external timestamps. Every forged signature, every altered report was confirmed. Veronica's apparent culpability appeared flawless on paper. Evelyn's hidden orchestration lay beneath, invisible to anyone not looking at the raw logs. I watched the screens as Adrian scrolled through the email chains and audit logs. Each click brought another layer of deception to light. I felt the years of manipulation press against me, but for the first time, there was control in my hands. The door buzzer rang and my heart jumped. I thought it might be surveillance, but it was a secure messenger delivering a verification certificate from one of Grace's contacts, a neutral source confirming authenticity. "Perfect," I said. "Now we move to the exposure." We split responsibilities. Jard monitored network security, ensuring no trace of our activity could be followed back. Grace coordinated with journalists, providing verified files. Adrian and I prepared statements, carefully wording every word to guide public perception without revealing Evelyn's true role. The first release went live around noon. Metadata and audio were sent to journalists along with detailed timelines, showing Veronica as the primary operator. Public reaction was immediate: outrage, disbelief, speculation. Headlines flashed across screens. Social media lit up like a live wire. I leaned back, letting the initial storm wash over me. Veronica's name dominated conversations. Evelyn remained in the shadows, her control untouched publicly, though now indirectly threatened. Jard spoke quietly. "They'll react quickly. Legal teams, PR teams, digital tracking, she'll try to contain this." I nodded. "Then we stay ahead. Observe, record, adapt." Hours passed. The tension in the room thickened. Every phone ping, every email notification, every social media alert was a potential threat. But we had prepared for this. Then, around mid-afternoon, the first direct attempt came. Our secure line cracked with interference, a subtle but unmistakable intrusion. Evelyn's presence made itself known not in words but in control. "They're probing our channels," Jard said, "testing defenses." I pressed my hands to the table, grounding myself. Let them probe, we have the proof. They can't take it away. Grace watched the feeds closely. Any attempt to block the journalists will backfire. Public opinion is already swaying against Veronica. She's the decoy. Evelyn underestimated how much people will believe the first narrative they see. I felt a grim satisfaction. For 6 years, my truth had been buried. Today, the first seeds of reckoning had been planted. Adrian spoke quietly, almost to himself. She'll strike next. Harder, faster, directly. I looked at him. Then we prepare for her move. Nothing else matters. Not the fear, not the pressure, not the history. Only the evidence and what we do with it. By evening, the journalists had begun publishing detailed reports. Social media amplified the story. Veronica's apparent culpability dominated every conversation. Evelyn remained unseen, calculating, patient, her shadow growing longer over the family legacy. I stared at the screen, Mallister's voice in my mind, and felt a strange clarity. The storm had begun. The fake twist was in place. The real confrontation was coming, and this time I would be ready. The night stretched ahead, heavy with anticipation. Every shadow, every movement could signal an attack. We had the upper hand for now. But Evelyn Shaw had survived for decades by manipulating every variable. The game was only halfway through, and I had no intention of losing again. The night thickened outside, the rain relentless, turning streets into reflective mirrors. Every car passing seemed to scan the city, every light flickered like a warning. Inside our safe house, the tension was almost physical. Jard sat at the laptops, fingers flying across keys, eyes flicking between multiple screens. Grace whispered updates into secure lines, her voice calm but tense. Adrian and I stood near the door, listening for any sign that the storm had found us. Then it came. A subtle ping, almost lost among the other notifications. Jard froze mid-keystroke. "They're in," he said quietly. "Attempting to trace the network, testing our defenses, they know we've released files." I felt the blood drain from my face. Evelyn, it had to be her. No one else had the reach, the patience, the sophistication. Adrian moved toward the windows, scanning shadows. They're probing, not attacking yet, but soon. I grabbed the recorder, holding it tightly. Mallister's voice, replaying in my mind, steadied me. Proof was in our hands, but proof alone wouldn't protect us from her next move. Grace tapped her tablet furiously. "They're trying to contact journalists, spin the story. Veronica's name is already trending. Public perception is with the decoy. But Evelyn, she won't let this go. Expect a direct move, legal, digital, or physical." I nodded. "Then we anticipate, we adapt, and we control the next step." Minutes passed like hours. The city outside moaned with the wind and rain, the safe house humming with the quiet intensity of surveillance and preparation. Jard monitored every digital pathway, ensuring the journalists received verified files while maintaining our cover. Adrian double-checked escape routes. I reviewed the files, the metadata, every forged signature, every altered report. Then the phone rang. A number I didn't recognize flashed on the screen. I answered cautiously. "Miss Schwartz," said a voice, smooth and icy. "You're making this very difficult." My heart skipped. "Evelyn, I'm listening," I said, steady despite the surge of fear. "You've exposed a narrative that was meant to stay buried," she continued. "Veronica is playing her part beautifully, and yet you've chosen to interfere." "I'm exposing the truth," I said, "not just to the world, but to everyone who thinks a lie can define me." A pause, then she spoke again. "You've always mistaken courage for disobedience. You should remember, disobedience has consequences." The line went dead. I set the phone down, adrenaline coursing through me. Adrian's hand found mine. "She knows exactly what we've done. This is no longer about exposure. It's about survival." Jard broke the silence. "We need to move. If they attempt to physically intercept the journalists or the files, it could escalate quickly." Grace's voice came through the secure line, urgent now. "We have alternate distribution channels ready. But you'll need to be mobile. Don't stay in one place too long." I nodded. The storm was here, both outside and within our plan. Evelyn's forces were moving, reacting to the controlled leak. The fake twist, Veronica as the apparent mastermind, was working perfectly. Public attention was focused, while Evelyn remained unseen. I felt the weight of years press on me. 6 years of erasure, manipulation, betrayal, all coming down to this night. I clenched my fists. We could not fail. Adrian spoke softly. "We stick to the plan. Anticipate her moves, stay ahead. The exposure continues, but we control the narrative." I took a deep breath, glancing at the recorder, the drives, the printed files. "We finish this," I said. "Not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight." Outside, the wind howled and the rain pelted the windows. Inside, we were ready. Every step calculated, every contingency planned. The first wave of public exposure had begun, and now the chessboard was set. Evelyn Shaw might be invisible, but she was not untouchable. The storm had broken, and we were in its center, prepared to turn it into our advantage. Dawn was pale, almost hesitant, when we arrived at the Arlington courthouse. The city moved around us as usual, oblivious to the storm we had spent the night unleashing. Inside the truck, Adrian drove with a quiet intensity, Jard checked the encrypted drives one last time, and Grace ran through the final verification of timestamps and audio files. I sat with my hands clasped around the recorder. Mallister's voice replayed faintly in my mind. Every word was a reminder of why I had returned to this battlefield. Not for revenge, not for recognition, but for truth. The courthouse was imposing, the kind of architecture that demanded respect and compliance. But I had learned over 6 years that respect could be demanded by force of evidence as well as by statute. We entered the building quietly, passing the security checks with the files and drives secured. Inside, the walls were lined with polished wood, the air smelling faintly of paper and varnish. People moved about, talking in hushed tones, unaware that the real story was about to unfold in their midst. We were guided to a conference room where journalists were waiting. Their cameras and recorders were ready, but they had no context beyond what Grace had fed them: verified metadata, Mallister's audio, and timelines showing Veronica as the apparent orchestrator. I took a deep breath. Adrian gave a subtle nod. I opened the first file on the projector. The room went silent. The timeline unfolded on the screen: emails, signatures, temporary credentials. The narrative was clear. Veronica had appeared to manipulate the tribunal records. The public, seeing this, would focus blame entirely on her. But my mind was focused on the layer beneath. Evelyn Shaw's invisible fingerprints were embedded in every file. Grace spoke calmly into the microphones. We have verified the authenticity of these records through neutral sources. The story you see first is the initial interpretation, but further investigation reveals that the true orchestrator is hidden in metadata, in approval codes, and in behind-the-scenes manipulations. I took the recorder from my bag, letting the journalists hear Mallister's voice firsthand. Listen, hear what was buried, hear the truth that was erased. The audio filled the room. Tension built as people leaned in, absorbing the reality that the tribunal's verdict had been based on fabricated evidence. My name, erased for years, was now vindicated in voice and fact. The journalists began asking questions. Grace guided them through the evidence methodically. The public will initially perceive Veronica as the mastermind, she explained. But the metadata, timestamps, and approvals point directly to Evelyn Shaw. She remained unseen, controlling the narrative from behind the curtain. I watched as realization dawned across their faces. The fake twist had worked, Veronica was still the visible target, but the real architect was exposed to those who looked closely. Outside the courthouse, news spread fast. Headlines flashed across screens and phones. Veronica Shaw allegedly manipulates tribunal records, dominated feeds. Comments poured in, speculation, outrage, debate. Evelyn Shaw remained in the background, her influence present but her role hidden to the general public for now. I leaned back, breathing in the weight of the moment. 6 years of silence, of manipulation, of erasure had led to this room, this proof, this voice being heard. Adrian's hand brushed mine. "We've started it," he said softly. "Yes," I said. "But the real reckoning is coming." Jard and Grace exchanged looks. "Evelyn won't stay passive for long," Grace said. "She'll strike legally, digitally, politically, but now we have the evidence to respond." I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting. I was leading, directing the narrative, controlling what had been stolen from me. I glanced at Adrian. "We finish this carefully, step by step, expose the truth fully, protect those who helped. And make sure history remembers it accurately," he nodded. "And Veronica? She's part of the story," I said, "but not the villain, not anymore." The room hummed with quiet intensity. The story was unfolding live. Public perception was being guided carefully. Evelyn Shaw's control had begun to crack, even if she didn't yet realize it. Outside, the morning sun broke through clouds, weak and hesitant. But it was enough to light the courthouse steps, enough to illuminate truth in the face of 6 years of lies. The storm had come, the first wave released, and the reckoning was underway. The afternoon sun had climbed higher, casting long shadows across the steps of the courthouse. I stepped out onto the marble floor, the recorder and drives in my bag, the weight of years pressing on my shoulders. Adrian followed close behind, jarred beside him, Grace directing journalists and technical staff. Inside, Evelyn Shaw waited. Calm, composed, her eyes met mine across the polished floors. She didn't move immediately, as if she had already predicted this confrontation. Behind her, Veronica stood, tense but clearly relieved that the first wave of public perception was not fully against her. I approached slowly, every step measured. I wasn't here to fight, I was here to expose, to show truth, unflinching, undeniable. "Evelyn," I said, my voice steady. "This ends today." She smiled lightly. "Demi. You've grown bold, 6 years, and still you misunderstand the meaning of obedience." I ignored her words. I turned to Veronica first. "You were never the mastermind. The world believes it for now, but it's not true. Your role was manipulated, controlled, used against me." Veronica blinked, relief and shame battling in her eyes. I didn't know how deep it went," she whispered. I nodded. "I know, and this ends with both of us seeing the truth clearly." Then I faced Evelyn. Every forged signature, every altered report, every manipulated record, it was laid bare, verified, time-stamped, authenticated. Mallister's audio filled the room as I played it aloud, voice echoing in the polished walls. "Listen," I said. "This is what happened in the field. This is what you tried to erase. You thought you could control everything, hide behind lies, and manipulate perception. But the truth cannot be buried forever." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she remained composed. "You think evidence is enough? Control is more than documents, more than voices. Influence survives." I shook my head. "No, influence dies if the truth stands in front of it. You underestimated that." Grace stepped forward. "The metadata, the audit logs, the timestamps, everything traces back to you, Evelyn. You orchestrated every manipulation. Veronica was only a pawn." Evelyn's hand trembled slightly. A blink, just enough. The first crack in her facade. Adrian placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's time," he said softly. I turned to the journalists. "Everything you've seen tonight is verified. The tribunal records were manipulated, the signatures forged. Every claim that Demon Schwartz was unstable was false. The orchestrator was Evelyn Shaw. She controlled the narrative, the falsehoods, and the cover-ups. And now the truth is here." The room erupted in murmurs, cameras flashed, and journalists hurried to record statements. Evelyn's face paled as the weight of her actions finally met the light. Veronica stayed close to her mother, unsure of how to process being used as a scapegoat. I stepped closer to Evelyn. 6 years, Evelyn. 6 years of lies, of manipulation, of control. Today it ends. You will face the consequences of your actions." She blinked, and for a fleeting moment, the iron control she always displayed faltered. The first real moment of vulnerability. Outside, the crowd had gathered, hearing whispers of the revelations. Social media feeds lit up with headlines. "Courtroom evidence reveals Shaw manipulations, Evelyn Shaw behind tribunal forgery." The fake twist had held just long enough. Now the true story dominated. I turned to Adrian, Jard, and Grace. "We did it," I said softly, though the weight of the moment was far from over. Adrian smiled faintly. "Not done yet, but we've won the first battle." I looked at Veronica. "This doesn't erase the past, but it means the future is ours to control. Your name doesn't have to carry the burden of lies anymore." Veronica exhaled, a mixture of relief and lingering fear. "Thank you, Demi." I faced Evelyn one last time. Her eyes were still sharp, but the armor of infallibility was gone. "Truth always finds its way," I said, "even after 6 years." The legal authorities moved in. Evelyn and Veronica were escorted out for questioning and investigation. The cameras captured everything. The story was no longer controlled by whispers or manipulated documents. It belonged to the truth, undeniable and complete. As the courthouse emptied, I stood on the steps, feeling the sun warm my face for the first time in years. The recorder, the drives, the files, all of it had served its purpose. My name was cleared, my service recognized, my honor restored. I walked down the steps slowly, letting the wind wash over me. The storm had passed. The reckoning was complete, and for the first time in 6 years, I could finally breathe.